What up? What up? What up? Good evening, everybody. This is Kevin with JK Sports 7. So, my good buddy Joel has done a lot of mock drafts recently, and I wanted to go ahead and get in on the action here. And today I'm going to be doing a mock draft here with the odd teams. Let me just share my screen real quick, and we'll go ahead and get after it. As you can see here, like I said, I'm doing all the odd teams. So I went through and I clicked on the 16 teams that are just the odd numbers for the whole draft. Going to let the computer go ahead and make whatever picks for the even teams. And we'll just kind of go from there. I'm going to probably reject, just to make it as smooth as possible, probably going to reject most trades in this mock draft. Now, if there's one where, I have the Titans, obviously, with the number 1 overall pick, if they go ahead and they get an offer for something just like ridiculously stupid, like here we go. We got the Browns that are already offering the first round pick, the 33rd, the 67th, the 94. Like that's ridiculous. If I see anything where it's ridiculous, maybe I'll accept it. For this one being the first pick, I'm going to go ahead and just make my own pick. But with that being said, we're off and rolling. So, Tennessee Titans. Joel and I have been talking about this for a long time, and I have been under the impression for quite a while that I thought that the New York Giants were actually going to trade with the Titans for the number 1 overall pick because they wanted a quarterback. I've seen a lot of reports out there over the last 2 weeks that say that, especially at the Combine, the Titans and Giants, there was a lot of movement toward the Giants making that exact move to move up 2 spots to the first pick, but it never materialized. And I think I know the reason why it never materialized. The Tennessee Titans are in a weak division. The Texans have obviously won the division 2 years in a row. However, I'm kind of the belief that the Texans being a 10-win team and winning a division, that means the AFC South can get got. And I think with the Colts and the Jaguars kind of playing like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of role, where you really never know who's going to show up whichever year, I think the Tennessee Titans are looking at their team and they're thinking, you know what? We have the number 1 overall picked in the draft. We are not going to overthink this. We have seen what the Will Levis experiment will bring. And I think that they want to switch it up and they want to give their second-year head coach someone who he can actually mold into the player he wants him to be. In addition, you have that guy come in and starting for a team in a weak division to where he might have some early success, just like CJ Stroud and the Texans did 2 years ago. And with that, I had the Titans taking Cam Ward first overall. So, and obviously, no surprise there. Abdul Carter goes number 2 to the Browns. Going to go ahead and take a look and see. That's insane. I'm just going to reject all those. All right. So like I said, Titans, they take Cam Ward. Browns, it makes sense to take Abdul Carter. I personally, my conspiracy is that they'll take a quarterback there. I think they're done with the Deshaun Watson experiment. And obviously being a Broncos fan, I saw what the Broncos did with last year drafting a rookie quarterback while having a lot of dead cap going towards a quarterback that's not even playing for you. I personally think the Browns will go that route and they'll take a quarterback at number 2 and just tell Deshaun Watson to stay home. We'll pay you. We're going to cut you as soon as it's financially possible for us to do so. We're going to get a rookie quarterback in here on a cheap deal in order to kind of right the ship there. But that's another video for another day. Back to the mock draft. The Browns took Carter, which leaves the Giants sitting there at number 3. I think this is where the draft can kind of go a ton of different ways. I'm of the assumption that Brian Daboll, as the coach, and that entire front office, they are walking on eggshells because they know how badly they messed up last year, letting Saquon Barkley go, having that huge extension with Daniel Jones, who didn't even finish the season. And then obviously in Hard Knocks, you have the general manager's son telling him to move up and draft Jaden Daniels, and they just kind of chuckled at it and, moved on. So I feel like the Giants are going to be desperate. I know they grabbed Russell Wilson. I know they have Jameis Winston there as the quarterback room. But as far as the New York Giants, I think as a last-ditch effort, they also go quarterback and take Shedeur Sanders so that Brian Daboll can sell to the owners of the New York Giants that, hey, I just drafted the second coming of Josh Allen. Just give me a little bit more time. No surprise here. The Patriots took, obviously, Travis Hunter, who I personally am super high on. I watched him at CU the last 2 years. I think the guy's a stud. I think he's going to succeed wherever he goes. Which leaves the Jaguars. The Jaguars obviously lost Evan Engram when he went to the Broncos this offseason. I think it's way too high to take a tight end here in this draft, so they're not going to go that route. You could go a couple different ways with these guys, but I think what we're going to do is we're just not going to overthink it, right? I think the Titans just committed to their guy and Trevor Lawrence. They obviously have Thomas as that really great wide receiver there that can kind of grow with him. I think they look to shore up the offensive line, and I think they're going to take Campbell out of LSU as an offensive tackle. And then this is going to be Genty, I'm sure. No! All right. For me, this is the first surprise in the draft. Every time I've done a mock draft, the Raiders just take Ashton Genty. So I'm kind of shocked. Raiders taking Will Johnson, cornerback. Makes sense, obviously, with being in that division with Mahomes, Herbert, and Knicks. Shore up your secondary a little bit. Kind of a weird pick for me, but it's all right. New York Jets are on the clock. Not Russell Wilson, sorry. The Aaron Rodgers experiment failed miserably. But they have Justin Fields. What do they want to do? I actually think that with the coach they have now in New York, I think that he's actually going to get a lot more out of his defense than what we saw out of them the last several years. So I actually think they go offense here, and they are actually going to go ahead and go a little crazy. So I think it's a little high, 7th overall, but I think with Wilson being kind of like very unhappy there, like he could stick around, he could not. I think they go ahead and they get Fields, McMillan out of Arizona. Just load up on the offensive side of the ball and try to light it up. All right, the Panthers take Walker. Obviously, they're really happy with Bryce Young now. Makes sense. This brings us to New Orleans. New Orleans, the team that probably is looking at quarterback now. This is something that I would not have thought the Saints were going to take a quarterback a little while ago. But it just came out this week that Derek Carr might not be able to play for the 2025 season. All right, I feel like we could go back and forth on this a lot. I think that they desperately need a quarterback. I think they're going to have their pick of the crop in the second round. And I think they're actually going to look at the board here with them needing help on defense. I think they're actually going to go over here. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to look at their division, and they're also going to say, like, look, we have a lot of holes. We have a lot of things we got to fix here. One thing we got to make sure is, we can't have Baker Mayfield or Michael Penix Jr. like throwing all over the place on us, or, with those two quarterbacks, they use their legs a lot, right? So I think they look at it more like, let's go ahead and let's shore up our defense. I know it's a little high here. I've seen him kind of raising up the draft. His stock's been going up. Going to have them taking Stewart out of Texas A&M there, shoring up their defense a little bit more. Bears take an offensive tackle. That is interesting because they were very, very into offensive tackles during the offseason. Okay. All right, here we go. San Francisco 49ers. They have a lot of people leaving with them having to pay Brock Purdy. With Debo gone, obviously the Broncos took a couple guys from their defense, including Greenlaw and that safety with the Palomalo hair. So I think while they could go defense, I don't know. The 49ers, I just feel like they're really kind of hitting, like, I feel like their window of what the team's been, they're kind of hitting the reset button a little bit. So do you look at that team and say, we had Debo Samuel leave, we got to kind of replace that production on offense? Or do you shore up the defense where they're just missing a lot of guys now? Oh, man. The 49ers, one of the things about them is they've always drafted really well. And I feel like while it isn't like, I think it is a need. And I think that looking at the board, they're going to say, like, we're not going to overthink this. We can get a wide receiver or tight end later in the draft. Obviously, with Christian McCaffrey's help, they're probably looking at running back in the middle rounds anyway, just kind of like shore that position up, but you can wait. I think they go ahead and they look at Mason Graham and they say, how did he fall to 11th? And they pick him up and his slide stops. And there goes Genty to the Cowboys. No surprise there. Good job, Jerry Jones. All right. Miami Dolphins. I think with their offensive tackle announcing he was going to retire, I think they go ahead and they take the big boy out of Missouri. They need to protect Tua. That needs to be a priority. Tyler Warren going to the Colts makes a lot of sense. I've seen him, and anytime he's available at 14, I think I've seen the Colts take him every single time. No surprise there. Falcons. Falcons. I look at them and I see them as a team that is completely fine on the offensive side of the ball. I think Michael Penix has a ton of weapons between Robinson, London. Not the biggest fan of Kyle Pitts because I've had him on fantasy the last couple years, and I've definitely wanted more out of the tight end position, but different discussion for a different day. I think the Falcons, they need help everywhere. I think that, you know, you need to get to the quarterback. You need to be able to stop Mayfield from throwing all over your team. You need to make sure that Bryce Young stays in the pocket and in check. And then whoever the Saints trot out there, you don't want them being able to get out of harm's way. So we're going to actually go with Mike Green out of Marshall. That's the pick here. Oh, all right. We had a trade. The Buffalo Bills move all the way up to take Harmon out of Oregon for their defensive tackle spot. Very interesting. I know they had some losses this year, but I actually thought their defense was in decent shape. So that's interesting. Cincinnati Bengals. They spent every single bit of their money as a franchise on their offense this year with signing Higgins and Mr. Chase. So we're going to go ahead and look at the Bengals as looking at the defense. Obviously, you could go defensive tackle, shore up that position, but I think you can get a lot of guys on day 2. Linebackers, I think it's a little high here for Campbell. I know he's great, but I think they're looking edge with the losses they've had this season, and I think they're just going to go ahead and do like best player available kind of thing, and they're going to go with Williams out of Georgia, shore up that side of the ball. Seahawks take an offensive tackle. That makes sense. You got to protect your investment in Sam Darnold. You just paid a lot of money for him. Buccaneers are a little bit interesting. So I feel like their wide receiving core is actually kind of getting up there with Mike Evans kind of being on the older side. This could be something where maybe they go ahead and go offense. But I feel like with Baker, what they're finding Bucky Irving, I feel like they actually have a decent amount of talent on that side of the ball. I really think they just need help with defense. And Cooper DeJean was fantastic for the Philadelphia Eagles this last year. And I'm looking at their secondary, and while they do need help at corner, I think looking at the board right now, I think it's kind of staring them in the face to take Mr. Starks out of Georgia. I think you can kind of shore up your secondary a little bit, just putting some good players out there. And there goes Campbell with the Broncos. That makes sense. Pair him up with Greenlaw and just kind of let that excellent defense get even better. All right, Joel's Steelers. Let's see. Who's the worst special teams? I'm just kidding. Joel saw me doing that, he'd kill me. All right, Steelers. One thing that the Steelers really are good at doing is drafting and developing problematic wide receivers and go and be headaches for other teams. They traded for DK Metcalf. They have George Pickens there. I'm wondering if they maybe go receiver here as kind of like this sign of like Pickens is wearing out his welcome with Mike Tomlin and he eventually will be shown the door. I feel like in that division, I think they played plenty of games where their defense kept them in games, but I saw plenty of games where their offense did not do much of anything. They obviously lost Najee Harris this offseason. You could see them maybe kind of going running back, but I think they do that day 2. I'm going to go ahead and say they take Golden out of Texas. I think you doing that, it kind of puts the writing on the wall with Pickens, and I think that you've got an excellent receiver to pair with DK Metcalf, where if you do show Pickens the door, you still have a fantastic batch of offensive weapons for whoever's the quarterback there. All right, next pick. You obviously saw the Vikings moved up a couple spots with the Chargers to take a corner out of Texas. Mr. Barron, not a bad pick. Packers. So this is where it's going to be a little weird. So I think that the Packers, they want to give Jordan Love some more help on the offensive side of the ball. I think, though, a lot of people have been talking wide receiver. I know that there's a need there. I actually think they're going to go a different route. I think they take Colston Loveland here. I know I don't see a lot of people with him going to the Packers, but I think that would be a perfect we saw what Jaden Daniels did this last year when he had Zach Ertz to throw to there in the middle of the field. I think that they look at that and they're like, all right, what do we do for Jordan Love to get him to the next level? And I think you give him Colston Loveland, and that offense just becomes that much better. Chargers take the safety from South Carolina, which leads us to the Texans. I definitely think the Texans, while they do need help at a few different positions here, I think the thing they need to do the most is keep CJ Stroud upright. And I don't think you need him seeing the dirt as much as he did in the playoff game against the Chiefs this year. So I think you get Booker, book it. He's going to be a Texan with the 25th overall pick. Rams are going to take, all right, they take a guard there. Which leads us to the Baltimore Ravens, Joel's second favorite team as a Steelers fan. Let's see here. The Ravens, I feel like they need more offensive firepower. I'm looking right there at that wide receiver from OSU, and I'm thinking to myself, how would he look on a team with Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews? Obviously, you've got Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry running it out of the backfield. I feel like having just a bona fide stud at wide receiver to pair with the talent you already have there, I think that would just give them enough to maybe finally squeak past the, AFC playoffs and maybe put them in a position where they could at least be dangerous and actually potentially have the ability to outscore the Chiefs or the Bills next time they meet. So they're going to go back here. Lions are taking edge. All right. I guess I could see that depending on how Hutchinson's injury is. Commanders, obviously not a quarterback. So the Commanders did so well last year. I actually was kind of impressed with what they were able to do. And obviously they just added Debo to that room too. So I don't think they need anything on offense. As far as defense goes, you're in the division with the Cowboys who, if everybody can stay healthy, that offense can be pretty potent. we won't talk about the Giants right now, but in this draft, they got Shadur Sanders. And if you have him thrown to Malik Neighbors, that could at least be serviceable in his rookie year. And then obviously the reigning champions, the Philadelphia Eagles, they're going to score at will. So I feel as if you need to really look at your defense. I feel like they want to shore up the front four. They saw what the Eagles were able to do to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. They took notice. We're going to go ahead and look at defensive tackle. And the gentleman from Ole Miss, he's 3 technique. You know what? We're going to go ahead and say they take Nolan here. I think they took a page out of what the Eagles were able to do, and that the front four with the Eagles were able to just cause havoc for Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. I think the Commanders know that they can keep up with scoring on anybody, but if they can't generate pressure, I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble in that division, especially. Cardinals take an edge, I guess. I think the Cardinals are just kind of like the annual team where they start hot, everybody thinks they're going to get it together, and they don't down the stretch in a kind of weak division. Don't know if I would have gone edge there, but that's fine. Kansas City Chiefs. Oh man, I'm as a Broncos fan, I'd love to draft a kicker here with the 31st overall pick, but I think what they do is I think they look at Patrick Mahomes and they're just like, how do we make sure that you stay upright? And looking at the people available, I know they could get an offensive tackle on day 2 and technically a guard as well. You can see here, as far as what the Pro Football Network says, it looks like the drop off is pretty steep in guard. You get down pretty quick on there. I think they could use some help, especially with what just happened in the Super Bowl. They're not going to want to go into another season where Patrick Mahomes is just getting wrecked every time he drops back there. They kind of have this knack for just like turning any wide receiver into a good receiver with Patrick Mahomes thrown to him. So I do think they go guard here. They pick up Mr. Jackson from OSU. A little bit of a reach, but I think it fills a need. And then the Eagles go receiver. All right. Well, little bit of a wacky draft here and there. Like I said, I know Joel's been kind of doing this a lot, and I wanted to get my name in the ring and see what my mock draft could look like in comparison to him. I know he and I have talked about doing a dual mock draft in the near future, so keep your eyes out for that. Thanks for tuning in today. Obviously, if you liked this content and me rambling about the NFL drafts, make sure to like and subscribe to JK Sports 7, and we'll see you next time.